And good morning, everybody. This is Michael Farnham, CTO with Set Solutions. Thanks for joining us on our Tech Thursday today with Guardicore. If you have not joined one of these yet, Tech Thursdays originally were an internal session within Set Solutions with our technical and sales teams. It was very technical focused, where we would bring in our different vendor partners and other people to come in and help us stay up to date with the latest trends and latest technology. And we use those sessions, and we still use those sessions to stay up to date so we can provide a lot of value to our customers. So we decided not too long ago to start doing some of these externally, so you could kind of get an inside view of how we here at Set Solutions stay up to date. And these are very, as the title says, very technically focused, and we try to stick to the meat of the demos, that kind of thing, so we can really get into the weeds on this with our partners. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to be doing that with Guardicore. In just a second, I'll introduce Milton over at Guardicore as our presenter. First of all, a couple of quick housekeeping items. So first, you should have received a gift card for lunch today, along with your registration. If you have not received that, please get with Lauren Lynch. You'll be getting some stuff from her later, and you should have her contact information, but please get with her and she will get that fixed for you. Also, at the end of this, we've got a questionnaire/survey that will be coming out. Please, if you can, just it's only like 5 questions. Please take a little bit of time to fill that out. If you fill that out, you get entered into a drawing for a $100 Amazon gift card from Guardicore. And that survey will also include a link to a sample report from Guardicore, a demo video link that they have, and a 1-pager on their Centra product. So please fill that out. And you'll also, by the way, get a link to the recording of this presentation. So please take the time to do that. It really helps us get some good feedback. And again, you get entered into that drawing for the questionnaire. So as we start this, we will be taking questions through the Q&A panel. So if you go down to the bottom in your Zoom window, you'll see a Q&A panel. We like to use that Q&A panel. That way we can mark the things as answered or not. If you don't do it there, if you do it in the chat, that's fine. But we just tend to try to keep it organized within the Q&A panel. So please ask those questions in there. We'll take those at the end of the presentation after Milton is done. If really good question pops up, I will interrupt Milton, and he's already okayed me to do that and keep it a little interactive. Otherwise, we'll let him run through it and then answer all those questions at the end. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Milton Keith, Senior Solutions Architect over at Guardicore. Milton, I will let you take it from here.
Thanks, Michael, and to the rest of the Set Solutions team for hosting this event today. So as Michael said, my name is Milton Keith. I'm one of the Senior Solution Architects for Guardicore. And what I'm going to show you today is the Guardicore platform. It is a very secure product, but it's highly flexible, but yet simple. And what we're going to talk about is how we can reduce the threat attack surface. And please ask questions through this. So segmentation. A lot of companies have tried it. A lot of companies haven't succeeded at it. And why is that? When you're dealing with stuff such as ACLs, VLANs, it requires outages. So we still see today a lot of networks that are still flat, unfortunately. And as I said a while ago, because yes, your VLANs are very painful. They require the outages. That little tweet we see down at the bottom, we've actually seen that a lot from customers where they say network segmentation projects is where CISOs get to die. You can try to do this with network-based firewalls. The problem is you have to watch that performance impact of that 15-year-old old generation, next generation traffic going through there. And then there's the challenges coming up of TLS 1.3. For those that aren't familiar with 1.3, they're going to do more end-to-end encryption. There was 2 major schools of thought with TLS 1.3. One said, we still want to be able to do the SSL inspection. The other school of thought says, we don't want to allow SSL inspection because that's how the man-in-the-middle attacks happen. The most popular TLS 1.3 supported client out there is Google Chrome. And Google has already stated they're not going to allow the SSL inspection. So we know where the direction of TLS 1.3 is happening. And the impact is all those devices I used to buy back in the day when I was on the practitioner side to try to do SSL inspection, those network devices aren't going to be as effective anymore. So now you have to get the security closer to the workload. This is becoming a workload issue, not a network issue. At Guardicore, we like to say, let the infrastructure be the infrastructure and provide the compute. Let the network be the network and provide the traffic. Guardicore will do the segmentation and the security. And that also brings us to this. Back in the day, back in 1997, you usually deployed a perimeter firewall. That was great. I used to joke and say, yeah, I defended the internet from my users. But now that you don't have the traditional perimeter, and then we see a lot more traffic is lateral or east-west movement. Depending on which report you read, the time it takes to detect a breach has lengthened. So Guardicore, we want to reduce that threat attack surface, contain the exposure of the blast radius in the event a breach does happen, and help you detect that breach. So with Guardicore, what I'm going to show you today is we have a product that's just going to provide you a single pane of glass. We are infrastructure agnostic. We don't care if you're on bare metal, hypervisors such as vSphere or Citrix VDI, or if you've adopted out there in the cloud infrastructure service such as Azure, AWS, Google, even containers such as Docker, the container orchestration such as Kubernetes. With Guardicore, we don't require any changes to the network whatsoever. In fact, we don't require any downtime. We don't require any changes to the applications. And for those of you that have already gone into DevOps or SecDevOps, we integrate with those existing frameworks. So there's 4 major technical functions of Guardicore. The very first one is visibility, and that addresses the challenge I hear time and time again from my customers is, we want to do segmentation, but we don't know where to start. We don't know our application dependency mapping. I remember when I was a firewall admin 20 years ago, I'd ask my app guys what ports you need open. The response was, I don't know, what's a port? With Guardicore, we're going to automatically draw that out. We're going to show you what is communicating with what up to that layer 7 process. And we're going to give you rich layer 7 contextual information. So it's not simply showing you here's source IP talking to destination IP on this port. The example I like to use is here's IIS.exe. It's running at this file path with this process group name, this process ID. Here is the file hash of that executable. Here's the user it's running as, and here is the command line that launched it. And it's communicating with an Oracle database over here on this Linux system with that same rich layer 7 contextual information. We do that both in near real time and historical. So for those of you that have regulatory compliance, Guardicore, when you have an audit, can show your auditors, yes, we know our controls in place. We can show you exactly what is communicating in and out of this regulated environment up to that layer 7 process. The second thing we do is prevention. And we do that obviously via segmentation. And we can do that enforcement up to that layer 7 process. So why do I keep emphasizing layer 7? Well, we all heard about what happened with Equifax. They had segmentation. Source IP can talk to destination IP. The web server is only allowed to talk to the database on this one port. The Chinese hacked the web front end, did a port scan, found that one authorized port, and were able to run their malicious executables to compromise the database backend. Guardicore would have prevented that because we would say, nope, only this web exe at this file path. Oh, and by the way, we're monitoring the file hash of it and will alert you if anything is changed on it. Can communicate with that database process backend. We have wizard-driven workflows, and we just recently released our artificial intelligence, our AI, to help automate some of the segmentation. We can take it up to identity. A very common use case we hear from our customers is they have third-party contractors that to remote in and control different aspects. Sometimes it's just HVAC, it doesn't have to be IT, but they can't put anything on that contractor's laptop or desktop. So some solutions say that's simple, just create one jump host per user or create a bunch of VDI. Well, now you get into infrastructure bloat. With Guardicore, we say, take that one single jump host, have your contractors log in through your Active Directory, and based on their AD group membership, we can say, this AD group can use this executable to this destination. Another AD group can use a different executable to a different set of destination. And we can also do policy via fully qualified DNS names, make it very simple. The third thing, which is a unique differentiator between Guardicore and everyone else in the segmentation space, is detection. We do breach detection. We call it dynamic deception. Think of it like a honeypot, but unlike a traditional honeypot where you're throwing out static lures and hoping the attacker stumbles upon it, Guardicore looks at file reputation automatically. We look at outbound IP and DNS requests, but we also look at failed traffic, which is a great indicator of lateral movement. So if I see that an attacker is on a Linux box and they're trying to exploit, do an SSH exploit, and they hit a Windows box, well, traditionally it's going to fail because Windows is not listening on SSH on port 22. We're going to redirect that attacker and spin up a honeypot on demand. And we're going to give them a full-blown working Linux operating system, not an emulator. Or maybe they're trying to exploit RDP. We'll give them a full-blown working Windows OS. So we have intelligence to determine which flavor of OS we want to present to them. And we're going to record everything the attacker does. So the attacker thinks they're in your environment. In reality, we've temporarily removed them out, spun them up on a honeypot on demand that they can't use to attack your network from. And we record every single thing they do. And we provide an automated forensic report, which leads us into the fourth part, which is incident response. Through the Guardicore UI, we can say, snapshot that VM, suspend it, shut it down, disable network ports, or report this internal external IP address to those more modern firewalls like Palo Alto and Checkpoint. We'll get prescriptive remediation such as delete this user account, quarantine the file. And what the bottom is just showing again is we are infrastructure agnostic. So how is our architecture? In the center where you see the Guardicore logo, that is our SaaS management component. This is a virtual private cloud instance, meaning this is not multi-tenant. Your Guardicore infrastructure is dedicated to your organization. It's not shared amongst any other customers. This is where the management resides. This is where the deception servers reside. And this is where our logging resides. And at no point do we store any of your data. None of your data traverses our components. We're talking about metadata, source IP, destination IP, the port, the identity, the policy, the allowed or denied. Now, the way we gather information, off to the left, you might notice where you see hypervisor collector over here by virtual machines or span collector. These are virtual appliances. Just think of them as passive network sniffers. So we can plug into that span port. We can plug in, we can take data from a Gigamon. We can consume VPC flows from AWS, or we can plug into that virtual standard distributed switch of vSphere. And this is going to give us layer 4 data, so source IP, destination IP, and port. It allows us to also deploy deception within 5 minutes in your environment. So as soon as these collectors are plugged in, they're going to automatically start mapping out what they see, communicating within your environment. Now, to get to that rich layer 7 visibility and enforcement is where our lightweight agents come into play. These agents do the enforcement themselves. So we deploy the agents on the OSs. They are not dependent on the native OS firewall, such as the Windows Desktop Firewall and Linux IP tables. A little bit about my background. I used to be a security tester at Microsoft on the security development team. So anytime I see these products that say, yes, we're dependent upon the Windows Desktop Firewall or IP tables, tells me two main things. A, they're lazy. All they did was create an orchestration system, basically a fancy UI for what's natively already built inside the OS. But B, it's running 100% in user memory mode. Anything in user memory can be manipulated by malware. Guardicore is making use of some of the APIs that some of my good friends at Microsoft wrote into the OS. The Linux developers put into the OS. And basically, we created our own driver. And by creating our own driver, it allows us to perform faster than the Windows Desktop Firewall, faster than IP tables. It also allows us to have consistency. So we're not going to just say, yeah, we can do layer 7 in Windows, but we can only do layer 4 in Linux because we're dependent on IP tables. Guardicore, we can give you that consistent layer 7 enforcement even in Linux. By not depending on that native OS firewall, it allows us to support more OSs than any other product. So we can go back to Windows 2000, Windows XP before they had the desktop firewall, back to Red Hat 4.5, Solaris, AIX, HPUX. So we support a myriad of different OSs. It also allows us to have more advanced features such as the file integrity monitoring, the user identity enforcement, the DNS policy. Now, what you don't see on this drawing here is what I call the aggregator. We don't charge for these, but these aggregators allow us to scale to very large environments. So the agents talk to the aggregator, which they natively support high availability. The aggregators deduplicate the events. And then they talk outbound on 443 to the Guardicore cloud service. And again, this is what allows scale. We have some of the largest telcos on the planet, some of the largest public cloud providers, the largest cable service provider as customers. So with that being said, enough with the PowerPoint, let's get into the product. Now, everything you see today in this UI is a RESTful API call. So again, for those of you who have DevOps, SegDevOps, you can 100% script this. You do not have to use our UI. This can all be accomplished via our API. And I'll show you later, not only do we have an API, we've thoroughly documented our API, which I hear time and time again from my customers. They greatly appreciate that. A lot of vendors say they have an API. We took the time to document it. So the first thing I talked about was that visibility. So I had created a map called last 24 hours. So you can create a map and say, show me the last 24 hours, show me the last 7 days, last month, or hey, I want to go back to this specific point in time 3 months ago. Now what you're going to notice in our map is what we call labels. The other thing about our map is it's not static. You guys can manipulate this map and put it in a form that you want to view it in. What's important that I see right here on this map is development's not talking production. These labels we can dynamically assign to the assets. So it can be based off of IP address, based off the host name, based off several attributes of the Docker containers. We can tie into the orchestration systems of the read-only accounts such as vSphere, Azure, AWS, and pull in their labels to your asset. If you have a CMDB, we can import those labels and automatically apply. The beautiful thing about Guardicore is we're extremely flexible with our labels. If you just want to use 2 labels, great. If you want to use 20 labels, that's fine also. We don't have a limitation. You can create a custom label hierarchy. If not, we recommend start off with environment labels. So production versus development versus infrastructure versus users. When I go into the environment production, I can see the various applications such as e-commerce. As I go into the app e-commerce, I can see the various roles that make up that application. So I can see I have 1 load balancer, 2 web servers, and 2 database servers. As I dig into the role, I can see the individual assets. And as I click on one of those assets, I see information about it, but also I can see that I have other labels such as this is Red Hat 8. This, I can see the AWS tags that came in, but I'm not seeing that right now on the screen because with Guardicore, we're not just giving you 1 set view. We allow you to have multiple views of the same exact data. So when I was a chief security officer, I used to tell vendors, I want information, not data. So Guardicore is going to help disambiguate through all that information and give you something that's in a usable format that you want to see. So here I am looking at the various apps. Or for those with regulatory compliance, I can look at it PCI versus GDPR versus CCPA. For those that are hybrid or cloud, I can come in here and say, show me what's in Azure versus AWS versus on-prem. So again, we allow you to have multiple views. So it's great for whoever you're communicating with. We all know in IT, you have different lingo. Security guys talk a little bit different than the servers, team, different than the developers. But imagine when you're talking, you're a director, you're the CISO, and you're talking to the business owners. They don't care about IT jargon. So now you can talk to them based off of compliance or even show this from a business unit perspective. Now you see we talk about a lot about labels because if not, you got what I call the big blue blob. But even from here, Guardicore can quickly filter on this information. So everything you see in this list from assets down, we can get from our agent list collector and orchestration. The agent gives us the ability to look for specific EXEs or that layer 7 process. Now I like to pick on accounting here. So I'm going to do a search for ACC because I know in this environment that all the accounting servers have ACC somewhere in the name. And now I'm showing every accounting server plus 1 neighbor away, whether it's the jump box that's managing the load balancer or the Active Directory domain controller that they're all communicating with. And I'm going to click on this load balancer and just say, let's make this hierarchy. And again, you can rearrange this map to a view that you want it to look like. So I'm going to make this more of a logical multi-tier app right quick. And so here I have that web front end, that load balancer, the software load balancer, communicating with the middle tier. The middle tier is talking to the database backend. Now again, everything you've seen so far is layer 4. So when I double click on one of these assets, this is where that rich layer 7 contextual data comes in. So I see it's specifically Nginx that's communicating with the web servers from the load balancer. Here I'm showing you that process name, the file path, that process group. Here is that file integrity hash of the process, even the username that's running as and the command line that launched it. And I'm talking back here to the web server. I can see Nginx is communicating specifically with Tomcat. And as I go inspect Tomcat, I see it's the Java process. Again, I'm showing that same rich layer 7 contextual information. And this is on Linux, so I'm not just limited to Windows. And that's because we do the enforcement ourselves. I see the Tomcat is communicating with the Mongo daemon on the database backend. So this is that rich visibility that we provide, and this is what helps customers achieve their segmentation. We want to give you that information so you can make the intelligent business decision, so you know what's communicating with what. I've yet to have a POC where I've gone into a customer's environment. We haven't discovered something that they didn't realize was communicating. Sometimes it's just simple as development says, no, we're not talking production, and hey, there's development talking production. Another time I went into a customer, they did a POC not of Guardicore, of another product 5 years before. The person that was managing that POC left, and that server was still up and running. We came in and showed them, hey, here's this product in your network generating a lot of traffic that they never purchased. And then I've had customers where I've gone in within 5 minutes up and running, we've detected malicious attacks going against their system from foreign countries. So this is that visibility. So the next thing I want to do is go into segmentation. So when it comes to segmentation, I can show you all the different controls we put in place. You have to determine what is an acceptable level of risk. You might start off saying, you know what, we just want to do environment segmentation. We want to make sure development can't talk to production. Versus an application ring fence where we have, here's an application like accounting that has multiple servers that make up the accounting system. We want to allow them to all communicate with each other, but filter what goes in and out of that application app. Versus micro-segmentation, we want to say only Nginx can talk to Tomcat and only Tomcat to the Mongo daemon. So basically we're creating DMZs of workloads of one. Every single workload becomes a secure enclave or a bastion host. These aren't new concepts, but this is a more effective way of actually accomplishing it very quickly. And that's what I'm going to show you is I'm going to actually go through some of that segmentation. So I've jumped in this environment where I have the accounting, and I'm simply just going to right click and say edit policy. And you'll notice our policy editor opened up. And this is a waterfall, top down. So you have override allow takes precedence over override alert, over override block, allow alert, and block. Think of the override rules as like SLAs. So your security team can create a policy that says, we want to guarantee our vulnerability scanner can get to everywhere throughout the network, all servers, and no one can block it. We want to make sure Windows servers, the lsas.exe, can talk to the service host.exe from member servers to the domain controllers. An override block might be as simple. We don't want database servers to talk directly to the internet because we want them to go through a proxy with DLP, or we want to filter out clear text protocols such as FTP and Telnet. Because you can say, Milton's a Guardicore accounting admin, and all he can do is impact the allow, alert, and block rules. So use the override as your SLAs. So now when I come over here and right click on the reveal map and say, I have the choice of two wizards, app segmentation and micro. So app is the ring fence. And you'll notice the lines change colors here. And those correspond to the two policies that we created. The first one represents these green lines, the load balancer talking to the web server and the web server to the database saying, production accounting, any process, any user can talk to any port. But then we see this orange line right here, and that corresponds to this rule. We're saying anything else can talk inbound to production accounting on any executable, any port, but we're going to allow an alert on it. Now, why did we take this approach? Some products say you want to do whitelisting. You want to say everything's denied unless explicitly allowed. Yeah, that sounds great on paper, but all of you that are in production environments, imagine how simple that is to achieve into a production environment without a disruption of service. And we all know, for those that are in security of the CIA triangle, availability is usually the highest priority. So Guardicore understands our customers are existing production environments. So we go with this learning observation mode. We do support whitelisting, but we found out talking to our customers that blacklisting takes fewer rules and is a lot more flexible. And it allows us to go in there without any disruption. So, and that's why I like to pick on accounting. Most people understand the business processes of accounting. You have month-end processes, quarter-end processes, and year-end processes. Just because you install a product, give it 1 hour, or you give it 72 hours, 3 days. That's not enough time to observe all your user traffic. So we want to give you a chance to observe your traffic, make sure everything's firing under the green lines, or you can go look in our network logs, and then finally say, okay, we want to move this to block. And now I have 100% ring-fenced accounting application. Now I'm going to choose micro segmentation. And what you're going to notice in this reveal map is that all these lines internally turn orange because we created the policy that says production accounting is allowed, but we're going to alert on it. Now it's up to me to come in here and say, add allow rules. And you'll notice because I have an agent on both sides, we take it all the way up to that layer 7 process. So the web server's Java process can talk to the accounting database to the Mongo daemon of 27017. Now when I come do this over here on the load balancer, you're going to notice it says any. And that's because one of two conditions exist. I don't have an agent on the load balancer, or like a lot of products, they will show it just like this. Here's one line connecting from the load balancer to the web server, whereas Guardicore breaks it down into multiple processes. So here I see I have Nginx and ATTK. So those are dealing with zero trust or governance risk compliance. There's the concept of attestation. Guardicore is giving you the chance to attest and validate your data. So I know what Nginx is. I recognize Nginx. So I want to lock this down to just Nginx and not this unknown ATTK process. So I can choose all paths or the very specific path. So now that I apply that, I see ATTK is orange because I still have this alert rule down here. So once I've now fine-tuned, made sure validated, attested, made sure everything is legitimate that comes in there and what needs to be required, I can say, oh, I'm going to delete that alert rule. And now we notice the ATTK line is red. Now, none of this is in production yet until we actually publish changes. So Guardicore allows you the chance to take near real-time data or even go back to historical data, and you take our reveal map and you say, what's going to happen? It's acting like a simulator. If I apply this policy, what's the impact? We show it to you visually. For the more traditional firewall admins, we give you more of the traditional firewall table: source, destination, ports, action, rule set. I can extend that and say, oh, okay, these are created by admins right here. Oh, but I see right here on this e-commerce, John Doe has created several e-commerce rules. I don't know if they're done. So that's where the rule set comes into play. I can come in here now and say, show me production accounting. And now if I were to publish policy, publish the changes, I would only impact these rules and not the e-commerce rules that the other administrator was working on it. So I'm going to delete all these rules to have it prepared for my next demo. So another differentiator between Guardicore is we are an actual security company. We have released a tool out here called Infection Monkey. It's an open source breach and attack simulation tool. It uses safe formable CVs. It shows you how lateral movement can happen in your environment. You can download this right now. Again, it's open source. It ties into the MITRE ATT&CK framework and the Forrester Zero Trust Extended framework. Guardicore lines up with identity and segmentation of the network of the 7 pillars of the Forrester Extended framework, but we're going to map out all 7 pillars and give you a recommendation on what you can do. The other thing about Guardicore is we have an R&D side of the house. We're the ones that discovered the Azure plaintext vulnerability, and we'll do a lot of write-ups because we have a very large global honeypot network. We just released this write-up about the Fritz Frog botnet. So we're going to get very in-depth, and what's interesting about this Fritz Frog is it leaves no files behind. It runs in memory, and instead of having a command and control, they do things via peer-to-peer botnet where they fetch the files, but they don't leave any files or traces on the machine to make it easy to detect. So we do very in-depth write-ups about this, and it's our way of giving back to the security community. The other thing that we can do with our global honeypot network is we've designed our own, developed our own threat intelligence. That you can go to threatintelligence.guardicore.com today and download this. We update it weekly. Again, it's our way of giving back to the security community. So here I can see, why is this the top attacker, this IP address? I can see what country the attacker is based out of. What are the associated attack servers? What is their attack flow we see of that attacker? Again, we publish this freely, but we take this information and we have what we call threat intelligence firewall. So if I go back into this system over here, we will take the top 250 attackers, scanners, and command and control and update the enforcement agents, where we will block the top scanners and block the top attackers, both traffic inbound and outbound to them. So here I'm showing those top scanners blocking to them, top attackers blocking to and from. Now command and control, why do we have that set to allow an alert? Because we know sometimes the command and control will utilize the CDN networks such as Akamai or Cloudflare. So we don't want to disrupt production traffic, so we err on the conservative side. We allow our customers to choose if they want to block this. The other thing I mentioned was identity. just to show you how simple it is to do identity rules. We tie into your Active Directory, so our aggregators talk to your Active Directory via LDAP, and they just need a user that has read-only access to the user and groups OU. And here I'm saying the Windows jump box e-commerce users can use Chrome and PuTTY to talk to the production e-commerce servers on Nginx and SSH daemon on ports 80 and 22. Here's a rule where I say server administrators can use PuTTY and Microsoft Terminal Services EXE to all production servers to the service host EXE and SSH daemon on RDP and 22. And then we do our cleanup rules to allow to block an alert on anything that happens. For those of you that have remote users, well, we can allow your remote users to go directly to specific authorized sites. So you can provide a list and do it *Microsoft Online. So this is great if you get Office 365 or Google or Salesforce. Anything else is going to get blocked if they go to it. They now have to VPN into your network and use your proxy with URL filtering. But you can allow them to get to those most mission critical systems of those organizations like Microsoft, Salesforce, Google that you trust to have security. Allow the users direct access to them. We can also take this same type of FQDN and use it internally on your servers. So I always say if there's one server I can attack, if I'm only allowed to attack one, it would be the patch management server because it has privileged rights everywhere. So you can say it can only get to, in this case, snapcraft.io, but maybe you have SCCM. It can only get to windowsupdate.com, patrick.microsoft.com, and limit to where it can go so it gets the patches from known good sources. So now I want to move on into the detection capabilities. Oh, actually, I lied there. I'm going to show you one other thing right quick. We just released our AI. So what you saw earlier was our wizard. Now we have our AI right here where it say, hey, it's suggesting that I create a DNS policy or NTP, or in this case, I want to choose Active Directory. And it says I can choose what servers that I want that for because I haven't set up everything. In some cases, when you say, here's what your application tag is, it'll automatically identify those servers. And then I can say, which machine can the domain admins use? So I'm going to look for jump box. And being I'm only allow RDP, I'm only going to allow the Windows jump box. And I can say within what environment, do I want to do production development? I come in here and say, let's include the processes. And so now when I go next here, Guardicore is going to automatically create all the policies to filter Active Directory. We're not just simply saying production servers can talk NetBIOS and Kerberos. We're taking it to the specific, to the system, the SMB server right there. Or I can look right here to see if there's another one. 139 should have service host, or some of them do. Here we go. 135 has service host.exe, or the LSAS. So we help automatically create these policies for you. If I go back, what you'll notice is that was a template version versus a do-it-yourself, these DIY right here. So maybe you have an application, you're the first to do it. You can create that tier segmentation where Guardicore is going is we're going to have a catalog. I used to work at Okta, so this kind of reminds me of what we used to do, what we did at Okta, where you can create your own application integration and then share it with the rest of the community. It will not have your unique identifiers in it whatsoever. It won't have your server names, but it'll have those rules and what the processes and the ports to filter it by. So you could do a tier segmentation, which is micro, or a simple application ring fence. Or if you want to whitelist just inbound flows to a specific app or outbound. So some things Guardicore is constantly improving and trying to make things even simpler to do segmentation. Now, talking about the detection capabilities, I mentioned we look at file reputation. So here I can see with the Citrix ICA client that the Authman server is clean. I see wget right here is a bad reputation. If I come over here on the dashboard and click on these 12 bad reputation incidents, I can see this top one right here is talking to Germany. And it's a WannaCry related IP and has no malware. If I click on that incident, it's going to tell me it was blocked by the source already, but here I can see what that exe is that we've identified as no malware, the IP. This is a brand new lab environment, so normally I have the ability to click right here to say snapshot that VM. So if we're not integrated with vSphere's API, we'll at least give you the recommendation, take a snapshot, suspend it, stop it. Or report this IP, the internal or external, to the Palo Alto or Checkpoint firewall. or remove this user account, quarantine this file. Policy violations are exactly that. So once you have policy, anything that's outside of your policy is going to be a violation. So we saw that same one right here, that WannaCry related. Here's a user identity policy. So I'm going to start investigating what's going on. So I see it's blocked. I see the Jumpbox Windows server had from the Guardicore Active Directory domain, Andy.e, try to use Chrome to the billing. Well, I know I have a policy that says only billing users can get there. So now we can go have a good talk with Andy. Why is he doing that? Sometimes we might show it's an executable that's not allowed, that wasn't authorized. And finally, what I want to get to here is the lateral movements. This is where a server either talked to an IP address that's part of your internal network, but the IP is not active and failed, or maybe we talk to a port. So in essence, Guardicore is turning every unused IP address, every unused TCP UDP port into a potential honeypot in your environment. And here's that high-level summary where we see a user logged in using SSH with the following credentials root. Now, this is a very simple password. You're like, well, that's not that hard. It's because we have a whitelist of over 770 easy-to-guess passwords we'll trigger on. I see customers will use previously used domain admin passwords, service account root passwords. We see intel.info was downloaded. It's listening on 22.22. Bin backdoor is downloaded and executed. Again, those recommendations right here. The session recording tab is play-by-play. Everything the attacker is doing. If I click on this indicator's compromise tag, such as listing, it highlights. So here's where we see they binded bin backdoor to every IP address. If I hover over this and see 4 shell commands, I can see, oh, this is where it's listing on 22.22. It modified bin backdoor. It catted the etc password file. If it was an interactive user, you would see a screenshot. So if it's using X Windows or RDP, we show you play-by-play screenshots of what the attacker's doing. We show the files involved, the processes, the network, the credentials, even a packet capture. So I had a large financial customer here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area where their lead incident response analyst said, Milton, this is cheating. Before Guardicore, I had to use multiple tools for what you're showing in one screen. We have a very large referenceable bank where, again, we've seen it earlier. It said 191 days before breach is detected. Now, that bank didn't say how long it took them to detect a breach, but they did say it took quite some time to eradicate an attacker, and they came to us after that time frame and said, Guardicore, can you help us? No matter what we do, this attacker keeps getting back in. So we deployed a couple of our agentless collectors, and within a day and a half, not only did we capture what the attacker was doing, we were able to help them validate that the attacker's been removed from their network. This bank will now tell you that it takes them an hour and a half to detect a breach, no more than an hour and a half, and no more than a day and a half to eradicate an attacker because of Guardicore. They started rolling out our microsegmentation throughout Latin America and South America, and they said globally we reduced their threat attack surface by 80%. We have several other customers where they said they predicted it was going to take them 5 engineers, a year and a half to do it via VLANs and network firewalls. We come in with one architect, and 2 to 5 weeks later, we're done. Completely segmented. So hopefully you've seen that Guardicore is very simple. We don't require any network changes. So if your network's flat, great. If it's already segmented, we can deal with that. We don't require a reboot or restart when you install our agents. These agents are very lightweight, so it's hard-coded how much CPU and memory they can use. They won't use more than 2% CPU and no more than 200 megs of RAM. We were designed with the data center in mind. This is not an endpoint product that migrated to the data center. It's the exact opposite. It's a data center that's starting to see more traction on the endpoints. So with that being said, time for questions and answers. So Michael.
Hey, Milton. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. So yeah, everybody feel free to throw some questions into the Q&A panel or into the chat panel. I'll ask them. I will ask a couple of questions that I've had, and as I've done research on microsegmentation, I actually talked to some of our people internally on the tech team about this. So one of it's not very specific to Guardicore, but it's around the whole microsegmentation / zero trust world. While I know that there's still going to be security network infrastructure put in place to, speeds and feeds, move packets around and that kind of thing. Conceptually, how do you see microsegmentation and zero trust affecting like network engineer, architect roles in the future? Do you think it's going to reduce their role? Do you think it's going to increase it? What are your thoughts around that?
So zero trust is definitely, you're going to have to work with the network team. Where products like Guardicore, we come in is instead of having to do this with VLANs and switches and have your network team, who's not usually the security focused engineers, they won't have to worry about maintaining, because now you can take a product like Guardicore and achieve that zero trust, stop that east-west traffic. And because you have it on every server, you can stop the north-south traffic with it also. There's still going to be where you have the network teams managing those north-south firewalls. So if you, at the perimeter, we're not a layer 3 router, we're not hardware. So you still need those at the perimeter. Or if you're trying to completely segment off your entire manufacturing SCADA with one location. But yeah, keep in mind that's a choke point where you can impact performance. So I don't see us adding a lot of overhead to the network team. We do reduce it. My experience when I've gone in with customers, we see us bring consistency amongst the different teams that usually have their own separate fiefdoms. We'll see the application teams, the developers, the network guys, the infrastructure, and the security saying, hey, we need just from this visibility because this will help them troubleshoot. We've had customers time and time again that have got Guardicore, and we don't claim to be a network monitoring tool, but their network guys said, hey, they love logging in Guardicore to help troubleshoot when they're saying something's not happening. They can come look in our network logs and say, is Guardicore seeing, because we have it on both sides, is even seeing that traffic from one source to the destination, and what can we see about it? Hopefully that answered your question, Michael.
Yeah, I did. I appreciate it. So we've got a couple of different questions that have come up. One of them, both of them are around integration. So maybe we can ask both of them at the same time, even though there's two different products they're talking about. So do you integrate with EDR products like CrowdStrike, and do you integrate with Palo Alto Firewall?
So we are working more with the EDRs. That's something that we're actively working on right now today. There's not a direct integration with EDR. We do have a direct integration with Palo Alto where, like I said, with that prescriptive remediation, we can call the Palo Alto API and say, report this internal or external IP address, and Palo Alto will automatically block it at the perimeter. We're doing several other integrations where we're trying to get to agentless enforcement. So you don't even have to deploy agents for that existing network infrastructure. And that's very common when you're talking about OT, SCADA environments. You can't deploy agents. Now, a solution I didn't talk about, Guardicore does have an integration partner called Mellanox. They make these high-speed 200 gigabit throughput network cards, and they have a network coprocessor that Guardicore is running on that network coprocessor. So if you can replace the NIC in that surgical device or that SCADA system, you can have Guardicore running and protecting at layer 4.
So another one came up in the chat. Do you have use cases where customers use Guardicore segmentation as compensation control for host-based firewall?
Absolutely. That is a very common use case, especially with PCI. As you know, the PCI controls is segmentation. We're used in lieu of those traditional desktop firewalls. So if you have Windows desktop and IP tables, we'll come in there. We're not going to interfere with those existing policies. We give you a chance to migrate to us. But with Guardicore, you don't have to worry about policy drift. It's because we have the central management. You can, in the visualization, you can see, is that rule still happening? Did it happen this past month? Did it only happen 3 months ago? Or is it no longer firing anymore? You can use us, that way you don't have policy drift, but also have a consistent policy on your on-prem servers. Or if you're out there in Azure or AWS, have that same exact policy. Because that's basically what we are, as a software-defined firewall.
Yep. Okay, so around data analytics tools, like if I've got, a lot of our customers are large enterprises that have a pretty mature environment already set up, like a security operations center, and are doing threat hunting and stuff like that. How do you think it's more effective to be in your tool, or is there are there some pretty good options for throwing your data out into, maybe they've got an existing SIM and they've got a SOAR that they've got some playbooks in, or is it kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, absolutely. Do I expect customers coming in and just stare at Guardicore all day long? No. You can come in here and do an integration directly like into a SIM. So we can choose syslog, even support the encrypted over TLS. It's very simple to integrate. You can send alerts off via email and Slack. If you are, for those customers that already have the existing integrations that we're in there, we already have an existing Splunk application for integration with Splunk and other tools. You mentioned threat hunting. Because we are API driven, so I talked about that earlier and I forgot to show that. We have customers that will use their own threat feeds and feed it into Guardicore. We've seen other tools that'll get feed into us, like Armis for OT. And because we have this big RESTful API, not only do we have it, we've documented it, and we've given examples of the code. So all this functionality you're seeing is documented within our API, within our product. But do I expect customers just to stare at our screen all day? No. Use some of the SOCs. I've seen customers with the SOC, they like using that dashboard, or they'll have a map and refreshing the map, and they'll see, because you can set up the map to show incidents on the map. Or they'll want to use this for network statistics. But most of the time, for the vast majority, they get an alert that comes in, and now they choose Guardicore to investigate.
Okay. Around the threat intelligence that you were showing earlier, I just wanted to clarify, because I had a question come up internally from the team, that threat intelligence is based off of your own research and honeypot network you've got set up out externally, correct?
Correct. That's off our global honeypot network.
Okay, and that's got, you can do export off of that via API, bring that stuff in.
Yeah, you can download this in right now and import that into your own system.
So is it a straight download there, or is there an ability to automate that?
Today it's a straight download. This is a fairly new feature.
Okay, well, and you could, if it's free, you could get a lot of people hitting that very quickly. So I want to make sure that wasn't too crazy. Okay, that's all the questions, unless anybody else has any questions. I don't see any more coming up. So I'll go ahead and start wrapping this up. Milton, thank you very much. Guardicore, thank you very much for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome, Michael.
Again, for everybody, just quick housekeeping again. Remember that you should have gotten a gift card for lunch. If you did not get that, ask Lauren, and she will get you set up. And again, we will be sending out a survey to everyone who registered, and you'll be in a drawing for a $100 Amazon gift card from Guardicore if you answer that. And again, only 5 questions. It's real quick. We're not going to kill you with marketing stuff and all that from it. It's really to get some feedback and to see if you want follow-up from Guardicore and us. We're just trying to give you some help there. So if you can answer that, that gives you that chance to win a $100 Amazon gift card. And you will also get that sample report demo video link and the Centra one-pager from Guardicore, and you'll get a link to this recording as well. So thank you everybody for joining us on another Tech Thursday, and please join us on the next one as we get those out. Thank you very much. Have a good rest of your day.